Click go live.
I think we're
I
live.
think we're live. I hope we're live. Let me check our YouTube channel. This is live on air production for our first ever Hot Fan Theory episode. I need to see if we're actually live on YouTube. I'm gonna assume we're live on YouTube as I try to
We
get to our
are. We
YouTube
are.
channel.
I just checked.
Okay, there we go. Confirmation. Here we are. It is the Hot Hand Theory crew here with you. First episode of Hot Fan Theory, episode 1. The best thing about this show, Geoff, is that I don't have to say analytical. Even though I can say it with no pressure for whatever reason, those who watched or listen to the podcast know I have a Chuck Knobloch situation with the word analytical. Except for now, I can say it very clearly because it's not, I don't have to. We're super excited to be on live, our first ever live stream. We're going to be trying out something different today. Excited to see how it goes. Geoff, do you want to describe to the people, to however many people are here with us, what we're doing today?
I could. I'm a little disappointed you didn't introduce me as your brilliant co-host. I like that little pump up, before I get talking on Hot Hand Theory. But
Geoff, my brilliant co-host, sir, would you like to explain to the people what we're doing here? Also, for
yeah,
everybody, anyone in the chat us this whole time. We would love to interact with people in the chat, whether it's 1, 2, 15, 100 of you. We'd love to interact. But Geoff, yeah, shout us out. What are we doing here?
So Hot Fan Theory is an idea we came up with. Shout out Kevin Danishevsky. He had been chatting with XJ and just talking about, we came up with the idea of an interactive live stream where it wasn't just, a question and an answer, and then that's just the end of the conversation. We kind of gave we want to give a full platform to people who want to come on and agree, disagree, anything in between, any takes you have. We'd love to hear them. We're trying to elevate more voices and create, a space where people can disagree and it can be friendly and maybe try to find common ground.
That's a great explain it and a great way to explain it. And yes, I totally agree. That's kind of the intention here. Bring people on who, listen to the pod, may have agreements or disagreements, and then just kind of hash it out together live. And I feel like something I noticed, Geoff, is like when you have conversations on Twitter, on other types of social media, you're really limited to these bite-sized, like 280 characters or wherever the case may be. I mean, regardless, you're typing, so you're not going to like type like a dissertation, although you and I have been known to type a couple of dissertations in DMs when we're having a disagreement of some kind. But I think that the best thing about it is that when you're just kind of face to face and even just voice to voice, you can really hash things out and figure out what you agree about and what you disagree. And it's just a lot easier to talk things out that way. So we're going to see how it goes. We're going to have a couple of people on with us today to discuss a couple of different themes that have come up over the course of our podcast. One about Paolo Banchero, just talking about our evaluation of Paolo and kind of how that compares with what the general consensus is on Paolo Banchero for this season. And a little bit about Julius Randle. We just found out that Julius Randle is going to be out for the entirety of the rest of the season, and what that means for the Knicks ceiling and relative to Randle's, individual ability. We may have some disagreements with the general public and general Knicks fans about that. So we have a Knicks fan to come on to talk about that. So that's kind of going to be our goal here tonight. Yeah, anything else you want to add? I mean, I think we have our first person coming on at in about 10 minutes or so, and until then we're just kind of chatting. Do you want to talk about the latest news with OG Anunoby, finding out that OG Anunoby is going to be probably coming back tonight?
Yeah, he's probable for the game. That's huge for the Knicks. I mean, I don't want to spoil what side we're on. And by the way, XJ and I do agree on stuff or disagree on stuff. We don't agree on everything, even though it might seem like it when we have these conversations. We are mutually aligned in how we think about things. I think we're both pretty analytical people. We value data, but we definitely have certain disputes. We had one this afternoon about, an intuitive Knicks related thing. But with OG coming back, I think we're both very much in line that the Knicks are close to the peak of their powers, and I think a lot closer than Knicks fans think. the absence of Julius Randle is going to be felt in certain areas. I think it'll be, if you listen to Hot Hand Theory a few weeks ago, you heard me talk about how it will specifically be felt against Boston, because Boston's best defenders are their guard defenders. And so, and they like to play small. So Julius Randle's size and the versatility of his initiation compared to Jalen Brunson would really be valuable in that series, as opposed to being overly reliant on Brunson when the other team has two elite guard defenders who they can just keep throwing at him. That's going to be really, really hard on Jalen Brunson and just the Knicks in general. So I think that, while Julius Randle's absence will be missed in certain areas, in a vacuum, the Knicks are closer to their ceiling, even without Julius Randle, as long as OG Anunoby's on the team. Because as good as Julius Randle is in a vacuum, a decent amount of his impact is kind of diminishing with Jalen Brunson. It's, they both like the ball in their hands. They both operate from similar spots. And so when you watch Randle and Brunson together, and I'll let XJ dive into the data when I turn it over to him, you don't see the version of Brunson we've seen the last few months. I think there are a lot of Knicks fans who are like, oh my God, Brunson has developed into this fringe MVP candidate. He's so good. What's going to happen when we add Julius Randle to that? And I'm not sure a ton of Knicks fans are fully considering that reintroducing Julius Randle to the mix could actually lessen Jalen Brunson's impact, which is fine. He's a really good player. I'm certainly not arguing that the Knicks would get worse. The whole crux of our argument is that relative to Julius Randle's impact in a vacuum, the difference isn't nearly as big, whereas OG Anunoby is just fully an additive piece. Everything you get with OG Anunoby is he's not taking anything away from anybody. He's going to come back and he's just going to be, all of his value will be accrued in the team's improvement. At least that's our theory.
Yeah, that was really well explained, and I wanna talk more deeply about it, but I do want to kind of wait for our Knicks fan who's going to join us a little bit later to kind of hash out the specifics of some of that stuff. Um, for the moment, I did want to talk about kind of OG Anunoby and a conversation that you and I had a little bit, which was what will the lineup constructions look like, moving forward now that we have this definitive news. I think that it's been a little bit difficult, and I'm not saying I'm relieved for the Julius Randle news. The Julius Randle news is awful. It's awful from every perspective, from a Knicks fan perspective, from thinking about Julius's perspective, my perspective. It's just bad for the ceiling of the team, all of those things. But at the same time, I think that what I really am curious is how the effect on the team, given that now we have definitive news. Julius Randle will not be returning. That is established. We're not waiting for him to come back. We're not trying to get wind of whether he's, taking full contact practice or any of that stuff. He's not coming back. So now Tibbs knows that. He's armed with that information. We're moving forward. It's going to be, the Knicks sans Julius. Does that affect the lineups that he deploys, knowing that Julius is not going to be out there? Does that mean that he's thinking about different machinations? This is not a situation where we're just like, hey, let's win as much as we can and hold it down. This is our team. This is the team we're moving forward with. And everyone's healthy, and not necessarily fully healthy, but everyone's at least a little bit healthy enough to play. And so, yeah, I think to me, it's like, are we going to see Tibbs break out some different lineup machinations, knowing that this is the roster he's taking into the playoffs? The biggest one to me, and one that we talked about, is, are we going to see, the same kind of lineup that we've seen, but pull out Josh Hart and add OG Anunoby? Or are we going to see, OG Anunoby in for somebody else like a Deuce McBride, which would give you two completely different looks? I think if you have OG Anunoby with Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride, and Isaiah Hartenstein, that's an awesome spacing lineup. Now, if you have Josh Hart in there, who literally had an amazing performance, one of his best performances of his career just yesterday, but literally can't shoot. This is not me giving a slight to Josh Hart. He actually cannot shoot. So I think that's kind of the thing that I'm looking at as we're getting some comments in the chat. Nick's Tate, what's going on? How you doing? Appreciate the support as always. The question is, any chance Tibbs starts bogey over Hart? Wow, that'll be really interesting. What do you think on that, Geoff? Let's get a couple of these questions in, and then we'll bring on AJ and talk about Paolo for a little while.
I think there's basically no chance he starts bogey. Sorry, Nick Stape. By the way, shout out Nick Stape. He had another excellent thread for Strickland today. He,
Fire.
if you're a Knicks fan out there and you want a breakdown of the game against the Kings and why the Kings just did not come prepared with any defensive game plan that made sense at all, check out Strickland. Shout out XJ who called it in real time. One of the interesting things XJ's talked to me about, and we're definitely going to talk about this on a future stream, is how actually errors by opponents can artificially enhance impact. There are certain examples of this we have in our mind. Yesterday's game was an example of them just saying to Josh Hart, here's some free like EPM points, because they basically said like your weakness is shooting, your strength is operating in the short roll and anything inside the arc and anything in transition. Those are the only things we're going to let you do. We're only going to let you operate in the short roll and in transition. That's it. That's all you have to do. And Josh Hart was like, all right, thanks guys. Like, I'm going to take this and run with it. And he did, literally. He was incredible. I think Tibbs has proven to like Josh Hart way too much, which is fine. Like most of it's deserved. I also just don't think he likes Bojan at all. I mean, in the first half yesterday, he played 100% of his minutes with Precious at power forward and no Jalen Brunson. Like, there's setting your player up to succeed, and then there's whatever the opposite of that is. He is not giving Bojan a chance. And you know what? Some of that is on Bojan. Like, he hasn't made shots. He hasn't really looked good on either end. But, like, at the same time, he played 6 minutes in the first half. He was 3 of 4 from the field. And then Tibbs was like, oh, the minutes aren't working. Got to go back to Josh Hart. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think he likes him very much. I don't think he trusts him on defense. Again, some of that's deserved, but I think he's going to stick with Hart. To me, the more interesting lineup question that we'll touch on later is Hart versus Deuce. What Deuce's role becomes with OG back. Is he just going to go back to being Brunson's backup point guard with a little bit of shooting guard? We know he likes Dante a lot. So, like, if Dante is playing 36 to 40 minutes a game, Brunson's playing 36 to 40 minutes a game, is Deuce going to just get those minutes and be in 16 to 20 minute a night guy? Or will Tibbs maintain some of those awesome 3-guard lineups that we've seen work with Brunson, Deuce, and DiVincenzo, except replace Hart with OG? Because as good as those lineups are, and as good as the spacing is, and as good as the defense is, everything Hart is asked to do at power forward, OG is just better at, except for rebounding. OG is just a better version of Hart in that role. That lineup will destroy opponents, and I don't think it should go anywhere.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Looks like Nick's tape agrees with that. We're all on the same page here. So let's switch up gears a little bit so we could not be all on the same page. Let's make this a little bit more, I wouldn't say contentious, but we'll see where we agree and disagree. We're going to move over to our Paolo Banchero conversation. We are going to bring on our buddy AJ, who we've interacted with from the Hot Hand Theory Twitter account to talking a little bit about where we disagree and agree about Paolo Banchero. So we're going to bring him on and then just kind of see where we land and have a little bit of a conversation. So I'm going to bring up AJ to the stage right now, who is on voice only right now. AJ, can you hear us? What's going on, man?
What's going on, y'all? What's going on?
Chilling, man. Chilling. Thanks for joining us, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I respect the Knicks. I like the defense they play. I enjoy watching Knicks games. I think Brunson is absolutely having an MVP caliber season. He's been entertaining the league, at that level, to say the least.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I enjoy watching a lot of pods, no matter if they're big, they're small. You guys do a tremendous job. So, but yeah,
appreciate that.
I saw the Paulo video, and I agree for the most part, but there's just one thing I think is going to be interesting when we get into the whole conversation.
Yeah. If you don't mind, AJ, I just first of all, I want to say, as a Magic fan, I have to imagine you've enjoyed at least the Knicks Magic games this season, with the Magic controlling that series this season, up 3-1 in the series. The Magic have played insane defense against the Knicks, and I think they got them in one of the games at least with a healthy. Yeah, they got them. They were one of the two teams that beat the Knicks when the Knicks had a fully healthy team in January.
Yep. That's
Brunson
a
was out that
completely different dynamic.
Brunson was out that night, which matters, but still, they still got him with OG and Randall. And I mean, look, the Magic are a heck of a team this year. We're going to dive in. If you'll indulge us, AJ, we'd love to just sort of introduce our point and let you kind of unwind where you disagree, where maybe you're a little bit closer to the middle, and give your perspective. Because I think one of the problems with the internet in general, but like social media specifically, is you get these headlines or these clips that don't give the full context of an opinion, and then people react and project based on those misconceptions. So I just want to reiterate, when it comes to Paolo Banchero, we do not think he's like a bad basketball player. Like, we've had people in our mentions that are like, "Oh, you think Paolo sucks?" No, we do not. We do not think Paolo Banchero is bad at basketball. Our full discussion was relative to making the All-Star game, which we just didn't think he was worthy of being an All-Star in this season based on.
Oh, I think you hit mute real quick, Geoff.
Better?
Yeah, there you go. You're back.
Yeah, sorry. We just did not think he was an all-star relative to, his peers and his impact in this season. So we're happy to talk about all things Paolo. I just want to get that point across. We do not think he's like a bad basketball player. I mean, actually, are both plenty high on his long term. And we could see a world where that long term starts in a week. He just breaks out in the playoffs. Like, that's a real thing. He's clearly a very skilled player. So we just don't want whatever Magic fans are here in this chat to be like, "Oh my God, these guys are haters who think he's just going to suck forever or think he sucks right now." Like, just wanted to make that point across, and really excited to hear what your perspective is and what you think of what we've been saying.
Yeah. So, I think from an impact perspective, at 21 years of age, I don't think it's fair to say Paulo isn't at that level of like the best 20 guys. I think what you got when you look at the All-Star game like that, but that's not what they base the All-Star game of. Like that's more like the All NBA, the way a player is impacting a game. But I mean, I think what I really disagree with, and I just want to get right into it, is that you guys talk to Knicks fans, and there's just one thing. I don't know which one said this, but it's Paulo is basically like, and I quote, like giving RJ Barrett the free reins to run an offense. And I think I have a lot of Knicks friends, and I think even they agree like that's crazy. And I just want to get right into it because that's where I really like had to like slide up and kind of just I really wanted a dialogue because I think Paulo at his skill set, 6'10", yesterday, the previous game against the Pelicans, we saw that his real problem is like shot diet because when he decides to attack that basket and is playing aggressive and the game gets intense and he plays a game manager role that he's still working on. He has a lot of dumb turnovers, being a point forward almost for us. Like I watched RJ. Like I said, I watched a lot of Knicks games. I don't think RJ was ever that. I think from a shot diet perspective, I think if you look at the stats, you could argue that's what it would be, but nah, like efficiency is one thing, the skill set of a player is another.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, because as Knicks fans, we are probably two of the lower people on RJ Barrett and take a lot of flack for it. So you're
Yeah.
you're kind of sparing us here when bringing up RJ and talking negative, or at least relative to Paolo, negative on him.
Yeah.
You made a lot of interesting comparisons there. I don't want to speak for XJ. I would say that from a ceiling standpoint and just like the flashes each of them have shown, the types of players they are, I would never have put RJ in the same tier as Paolo. I think that Paolo is a higher pedigree player. I think that he has a much higher defensive ceiling, which I don't think anybody talks about. We saw his rim protection a little bit in the Olympics. I know the Magic haven't gone too much to him in that small lineup with him playing center. I'm really interested to see if Mosley busts that out in the playoffs, if they ever play like the Bucks or the Celtics or the Knicks even. Maybe not the Knicks because the Knicks go pretty big most of the time. But if they play one of the teams that can play a little bit smaller, I love that foursome of Paolo, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, and Jonathan Isaac. I think that's super interesting. And I think that gets the best out of Paolo Banchero because he can protect the rim. He can slide out on the perimeter versus bigger wings. And those lineups will create more space for him. And I think that will enhance his efficiency overall. I don't view RJ on the same level as Paolo. And to be honest, I sorry to whatever Knicks fan that pisses off if you're still holding some RJ stock. I still have some myself. I just think they're different levels.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, AJ. So did you hear that from like our account, or are you saying like you heard Knicks fans talk about this?
No, I heard this from one of literally like the video you guys have about like it has kind of a clickbait title, but it's like
Yeah.
is Paulo overrated? And for
Right.
the most part, I think you guys made very fair points. But that one, I think it was 4 minutes into the video. That one was like, okay, they came out strong, like comparing to RJ, respectfully to RJ, like
Yeah.
even like 60% of Knicks fans can't stand RJ, like his last stint with the Knicks. So
I
yeah,
think so. Yeah. So I if we
That
made a
almost certainly had to be me. Actually, you would never.
yeah, I was
You would
gonna say
never.
I would I
You would
probably
never
never.
speak. You would never speak that hyperbolic.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
So
probably
if I
a
said
little
it,
hyperbole
if
there.
I said it, I will, I guess, own it. I must have been in the moment, but I definitely. What's weird is I think that video came out after the trade, like when RJ wasn't a Knick anymore.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to, after we're off, go back and rewatch that video just to see how crazy I was
So
talking. But
at that time, and I don't know if you guys have changed your opinion because first of all, you also said you guys think Franz is the guy in Orlando. So I don't know, at that time I remember Kenny Smith, and I know we can't take the TNT crew seriously, but Kenny Smith saying that the Knicks don't have a player better than Paulo. So the Paulo talks were heating up. He was gaining momentum on his All-Star uh, eventual All-Star appearance. But I think that's crazy. I don't think Paulo is a better player than Jalen Brunson right now. So at that time, we also beat the Knicks for the second time, I believe. So
Yeah.
there was the Paulo topic definitely came out for Knicks fans, and it's gonna heat up if we if we match up in the playoffs.
I
But
hope it
yeah,
happens, honestly, because I actually live in Jacksonville, Florida, so I will be down there in Orlando for some games if the Knicks play
oh
the
man,
Magic in the first round. So I really hope it happens. And I just want to say real quick, so on the Paolo RJ comparison, I don't think it's a valid comparison. Like I'm sure if either of us said that, we were being hyperbolic for sure. But the point of the or some underlying aspect of the comparison, I think at least comes down to the efficiency level, which is something that you touched on, AJ. I
yeah,
just think when you use as many possessions as Paolo does, so Paolo is usage is like a 29, I think, or something like that. When you
right,
use the possessions that he does with the inefficiency at the rate of inefficiency that he does, it's really hard to be a positive impact player. And like you even just said, his issue is like his shot selection. One of his big issues is
yeah,
his shot selection. So honestly, if he just took fewer shots, he'd be a much better player instantly without any of his skills improving,
right,
without being more skill, like being like anything. All he needs to do is change that aspect of his decision making. But unfortunately, like that's a consistent part of his decision making. I think a
yeah,
lot of fans, at least I hear them say, well, look at the surrounding supporting cast that he has in Orlando. But it's like, if you're shooting, he's 30th percentile in the NBA in true shooting and 24th percentile in effective field goal percentage. His points per shot attempt, which is, total points scored per 100 shot attempts, is 109.4. When that's your points per shot attempt, that means that you're like basically any average shot from any of your teammates is probably better than the kinds of shots that he's taking. So I think at least like I don't agree that, it's like RJ was running the offense, but I do think that the comparison probably comes from a place of using possessions inefficiently and to such a degree inefficiently that you're sort of like tanking the other impact. And Paolo brings so much impact in other ways. He's sort of tanking it by taking bad shots consistently. And that's something that RJ Barrett did a ton of as a Knick and that he's doing less of as a Raptor. So I think that that's the only place where I would make a comparison. But yeah, I clearly don't think they're comparative as players.
Yeah.
Especially from I'm sorry, AJ, you go.
So, I feel like Paulo, obviously he against bad teams too, because against good teams, he's much more locked in and he becomes more of that point forward we like to see and really manages the game better. But against bad teams, he gets like complacent with tough mid-range shots and as Magic fans, we get frustrated. We're like, dude, attack the basket. Like you're 6'10", you're like super mobile for your size. Nobody can really stop you, once you decide to go in there. So definitely the shot diet. But one thing is I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we have a point guard. The Magic do not have a point guard. You know what I mean? That's something people tend to forget. Our starting lineup right now is Jalen Suggs, Gary Harris. That's like two shooting guards, and Paulo has to play a point forward role. And I think Paulo is the best shot creator we have because as good as Franz has been this season, as good as he is, he still needs to add to his game and find ways to create off the mid range. Jalen Suggs can be a great shot creator when he's on. When because there's games where he's just another offensive weapon, but there's games where he's just a good defensive player, good spot up, but isn't really a player that could create shots at times.
Yeah, I feel like you're getting to the point that Franz and Suggs are more of connective passers than initiating passers. Like they don't actively create advantages for their teammates, but if an advantage is created for them by somebody else, they're good connective passers. They're good at keeping the advantage. What do you think of Mosley bringing both Cole Anthony and Fultz off the bench? Because they seem to be kind of redundant, and there could be some merit to pairing one of them with Suggs in the starting lineup and then maybe having a little bit more of that initiation juice from the guard position. Would you be on board with that? Or do you...
Cole is extremely offensive. I don't think he's a playmaker. I think he's an offensive player. He's a streaky scorer, can basically, at times just close a game for you depending on, because he's that type of scorer. And Markelle Fultz, listen, I don't know if you guys have watched enough Magic games, but Markelle Fultz is on his way out of the Magic, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Sad what happened with Fultz.
It's really his health.
Yeah.
There's clearly every time he takes a jump shot, something is bothering him. So Markelle, as much as he could have been that guy. He was that guy to end last season. A point guard that can initiate offense. Especially when we go stagnant. Just a guy that can instead of just standing around, like he gets to the basket, and he was that guy for us. But right now, man, I would love for Paolo to get easier shots, to become a cutter, to basically play the role that Franz and Jalen plays. We need a point guard. That's the truth. We need to. We're a great team. Our defense is top 3 right now, or top 4, but we need to unlock our offense. We're an offense that is yet to be unlocked. That's just the truth. We need that player that'll bring this to life, because it's there, man. We're the only team with 2 6'10" wings or 6'10" forwards. We have a formula right now of just a tall team, but our offense is just not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a lot of really interesting points to me, because the question you kind of are raising is how much of, something I say on here a lot is that somebody's impact is being artificially enhanced. But how much of Paolo's impact is actually being artificially stepped on by necessity? Because you raise a really good point that if Paolo isn't creating the offense, who is going to create the offense? And that basically your point is, if they gave the initiation reins to somebody else on the team, Paolo's individual impact might go up because all of a sudden his efficiency would go up and some of the bad shots he takes would be removed, but the team would actually get worse because I think that's what you're saying, because whoever replaced his initiation reps would actually do a worse job. So like Paolo would be better off, but the team would be worse off, I think is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think, there's times where you look at there's games, I gotta admit, there's games where Paolo does a great job of being, the connector for us. He's still a great playmaker even when he's not hitting shots. But there's games where, his efficiency and his field goal, he's sacrificing taking tough shots because quite honestly, our offense is stagnant. If you would tell me that Paulo was doing this in an offense that had a scoring point guard and it was balanced and our offense was actually like top 10 in the league or something like that, and Paulo was still with these horrible numbers efficiency wise, then I tell you something's wrong. But it's not like our offense is great without him anyways. You could look at net rating and stuff, but that never tells the whole story. But yeah, that's basically what I mean. Like, I don't think, as good as Franz is, he doesn't have it to create a shot like Paulo.
I guess you go ahead, Geoff.
I was just going to say, I think me and XJ would both agree with that. I mean, or at least I would. I don't think Franz has the initiating chops that, and to be honest, I think that's the reason that even as high as I am on Franz and as, I don't want to say low, but relative to everybody else, as low as I am on Paolo's impact today, I would still bet on Paolo having a higher ceiling than Franz. I think Franz caps out as a really additive number 2 who can play off of a star, who can defend multiple positions. Yep. I think Paolo can be like, his absolute ceiling is being the guy on a contender. I think there's some things he has to clean up, some things you just alluded to, and maybe his team needs to get better around him as well. But I think these are two different things. I think who can be better down the line and who's helping the team more right now are two different things.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, that was the most befuddling thing about the conversation. And me and XJ talked about this off air a lot. We're so high on Suggs and Franz and how much they're helping, and Jonathan Isaac, to be honest, like how good Isaac's been lately. Isaac's been incredible. And, you hear a Magic fan, all they hear, it's like they want to stand on the shoulders of the team to elevate this one guy. Like, they want there to be like a Superman complex or something. And we're actually saying the opposite. We're saying, like, yeah, Paolo's good, but man, they have a lot of good pieces. Like, Franz is a really good piece and Suggs is a really good piece. And yeah, now Isaac's a really good piece. So definitely, I'll turn it over to XJ. I'll turn it over to XJ, but I do think that's important to point out.
I like the direction you took the conversation, Geoff, because I would say, just thinking like future oriented, I haven't made any claims related to like kind of like Paolo's future. I think his ceiling, I could see a range of outcomes for his ceiling, including being the number 1 on, a championship contending team. I could see that in his future in terms of his range of outcomes. But as far as right now, I think that that's kind of where we're talking about. And he's definitely limited in his capacity to be a primary creator. And I don't think Franz definitely doesn't have the abilities to do that, but I think Paolo is also very limited in his ability to do that. And I think that's what we're seeing. And so, yeah, I guess it's just like, to me, if Paolo wasn't initiating the offense, how do they initiate offense? How do they get offense going? I mean, you watch a ton of Magic games, AJ. I've watched, a lot. Actually, I don't know. They made me get a Bailey's Sports, a Bally Sports subscription to be able to watch the games. Yeah, Bailey's, whatever it is. I don't know. But yeah, I'm just pissed because I'm paying like $15 a month for that just to watch Magic games. But anyway, my point is, when Paolo's off the court, how do they get offense going? And obviously their offense is slightly better when Paolo's off the court. I don't think that means that it's his fault. Obviously, we're talking about Paolo, who's playing primarily against starting units relative to like bench units. But at the same time, they're initiating offense somehow when he's not off the court, and they're not losing a ton. So I guess I
got the guy.
Yeah.
It's Joe Ingles.
Joe Ingles. There you go.
Joe Ingles. So the reason I didn't bring him up because he's a point guard. He's like the point guard. But bro, Joe Ingles, man, I love him. he's in the back end of his career, but our bench unit is at his best when Cole Anthony has it going. Jonathan Isaac comes out of the bench. You know, he's an immediate impact player. Franz, you know, when we have Joe Ingles at the point, Cole shooting guard, maybe Gary or Franz at the three, Isaac and Mo. You have, you know, Mo is also an immediate impact player when he comes into. So, you know, if our game is pretty predictable, you know, especially for the playoffs. If our starting unit comes out cold, the game's not over. If our bench unit comes out cold, then I'm telling you how it is. Like we're in trouble. But if our usually when we come out cold with our starting unit and our bench unit comes in with Jonathan Isaac and we change the game like that, so we absolutely feed off a lot of our bench unit. It's not even like when Paulo's off the court. I think it's just, you know, our bench is really good and wins us games. And I think, dude, also like once it's just like the flow of the game for us. Once the bench unit gets going in the third quarter, I'm confident that, you know, our starting unit can come out better, you know? Like they give our team life. So to answer the question of who initiates offense when we don't have it going, it's really tough. This team is young, so it really depends on how we start, you know, the first half of games, you know. But definitely our bench unit is what gives us life, you know.
So to contextualize AJ's points, because I mean he clearly knows his teams. Here are his team. Here are two numbers that surprised me that totally back up what he was just saying. Number one, there's no player on the Magic who has a higher nets or has a higher offensive rating swing than Joe Ingles. The team performs the best offensively when he's on the court. They score 116.1 per 100 possessions. And they perform the worst offensively almost by a lot when he's off the court, scoring only 109.9 points per 100 possessions. So Ingles, to AJ's point, is more impactful to the offense than someone like me who's only watched, you know, 10, 15 full Magic games and then clips and film of the rest. So that surprised me. And then the second thing, AJ brought up a lineup. He brought up Ingles, Isaac, Mo Wagner, Cole Anthony, and Franz Wagner. That lineup is beating teams by 21 points per 100 possessions over, to be fair, not a huge sample size. But, I mean, those were two really good points. And I think the question would be to sort of play devil's advocate with me and XJ's starting position. Yeah, Joe Ingles does a nice job off the bench, and he probably plays, you know, like 20 minutes a night, 15 to 22 minutes a night. Is that enough to say, okay, well, Paolo's shouldn't be initiating the offense in those closing minutes or in those starting minutes when it's versus opposing starters? So I'll pass it over to you, XJ.
Yeah, I think to me, it's like, I guess the point that I'm getting at, and I agree, I think these are great points about Ingles and the bench, and I agree with them, and I'm you know, familiar with the data on this. I guess what I'm getting at is that if Paolo's on the court, somebody has to initiate offense, right? Like it's going to happen. Like if Paolo's injured, if Jalen Brunson is out, somehow the Knicks are going to have initiate offense. They're going to figure out a way to do it. And the point is, to me, it's like every team's going to score like a certain amount of points. It's essentially like a floor of the number of points that a team is going to score. And you have to look at your analysis from that floor. It's not like, okay, Paolo's out, they're going to now score 70 points in a game. Like they're still going to score whatever they're going to score, which is going to be probably in the hundreds in terms of offensive rating. And the point to me is like, is it true that it's better that Paolo is initiating the offense than another player? We see in the case of Ingles with the bench, it's probably better that Ingles is initiating the offense in those situations. Obviously, he's older. He's not going to play 35 minutes a game, and he's not going to be able to initiate offense for the entirety of the game. But if you put the ball in someone else's hands who's not as good of a primary initiator as Paolo, maybe you're still unlocking Paolo to A, use fewer possessions where he's taking bad shots and being extremely inefficient, and B, he's able to have an impact off the ball in other ways where he's like more of a slasher. And It's kind of funny, plays sort of the RJ Barrett role as opposed to the Jalen Brunson role on the team, where he's less of a point forward and more of a slashing wing. You know what I mean?
So we actually, you know, when Joe has it going and he's not getting completely exposed on defense, which that's a problem, We've played him in our closing lineups. Like we've had Joe play the point in the final 4 minutes of the game, accompanied by Suggs, Franz, Paulo, and Isaac. So absolutely, and it's just Paulo playing off ball. Once we actually get a point guard that is our guy in that position, it's gonna unlock other things for Paulo. It's like people think he eats up possessions, and that's what it looks like. But trust me, like at times that's what we need. And you saw it. I don't know if you guys watched the Pelicans game. I think it's a great example of that. Like, he he's one of the more complicated topics in terms of advanced stats. Like that's just how I look at it, because you can't really say he's a negative for the team, but that's what numbers would tell you. But yeah, I
By
mean,
the way,
having a
are you,
point
are you
guard
talking
like,
about Paolo? The
yeah,
numbers don't
yeah,
say that Paolo is a negative. The number, so the advanced metrics say that Paolo is in the 80, basically around the 80th percentile player in the NBA. So that's like still a border, like below an all-star for sure, but like still an amazingly impactful player. So I just want to clarify, the numbers
yeah,
don't say
yeah,
that Paolo's like bad or anything like that.
yeah, yeah. But
And AJ, if you don't mind, I have a question for you regarding the initiation. So to me, from the outside, it feels like Franz and Paolo should be almost perfectly interactive, both offensively and defensively, because on defense you have the switchability. They both can guard multiple positions. They both, like, Franz a little bit less than Paolo, but they're both capable of protecting the rim. And on offense, it seems like they should be able to flip and both screen for one another. Franz
yeah,
can space off of Paolo.
yeah. I
Do
wanted to
they
bring
run?
that up.
Do they run screen and roll it all together? Do they try and use them together like that at all, or is that still yet to
Yeah,
come?
yeah, absolutely. So I know I said there isn't another initiator on our team, because I'm talking from a perspective of when we don't have our offense going, right? That's when Paulo's he's forced to take tough shots, and when things aren't looking good. But if Franz is getting to the basket like he does, like when he's attacking, and usually what I look at when I know when the Magic are gonna run a team out the gym or just win a game, is if Franz is getting to the basket early, that's a bad sign. Especially if he can get to the basket a couple times and get his three pointers going, like, and he's in a rhythm from the 3 point line. That's when you put Paulo in the post up. That's what we do. We post up Paulo. We try to force a double in a mismatch, and if Franz is open for three, he could take a three or just drive. And you guys seen the type of driver of a basketball Franz can be. That's a problem. And also we also run pick and rolls with Franz and Paulo. So they're absolutely, Franz can be an initiator, but if he doesn't have it going in terms of driving the basketball, he kind of, and he doesn't have his jump shot going. He doesn't have the mid range creation yet. So that's why I mean that I don't view him as that initiator yet, but he could definitely, when he has it going, he definitely could be an initiator, and he's a great passer as well.
AJ, yeah, I totally, I like everything that you just said. Um, before we really appreciate you joining, man. This was a really great conversation. Just a couple last questions that, while we have you on here. So one is, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Who do you think is like an ideal kind of guard to put next to Paolo? Like if you could pluck anybody off the NBA in the NBA as like a point guard to handle some of those initiation reps, and that works really well with Paolo, who would you probably say, or like what type of player? Like, are we thinking like a Donovan Mitchell type or something like that? Like, what are you actually thinking here?
Um, that's the question I think the front office is asking themselves right now. That's like a championship, level question. We're missing a guy. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a guy right now, but people mention young players like Anthony Simons, and that's kind of a project, because he's in a bad team. He isn't consistent. And I'm like, but obviously when you talk about superstars, you bring a guy like uh like Donovan Mitchell, you know what's gonna happen, the type of impact uh he'll have. He's a top, in my opinion, a top 10 scorer in the league, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
So
I love the Simons fit, if I'm being honest. I agree with some of your concerns. He hasn't been on a good team in a while, but I think that Simons' biggest area of concern individually is his defense. And
right.
that just seems to be a perfect fit with an elite defensive team. Like the Magic are going to be an elite defensive
Or
team
a
for a
Darius
long time.
Garland. A Darius
Yeah.
Garland is
Darius
a guy
Garland's a
people
good
talk
one.
about a lot. So
Yeah.
just a guy that can just, he doesn't have to be a great defender like you said. Just a guy that could fill what we need. You know, those guys would be completely comfortable in the systems we run. You know, like with Suggs, Isaac, Franz, and Paul. That's a tall lineup. That's perfect for a guy that, you know, shot that consists of 3-pointers coming off screens. So just, you know, but yeah, that would be my answer to that question.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you remember, XJ quickly was tied to the Magic a lot too.
I was
And like
thinking quickly too. That like the whole
obviously
time I'm
Man,
thinking quickly.
yeah.
I like Quickly for a bit, but you know, he did a good job when RJ and Scotty were healthy with the Raptors. But I still don't see him as, you know, he would have been nice, but still not the guy, I feel.
Yeah, but that's the thing about quickly is like you can debate about his ceiling, but when you put him with other good players, he
Yeah.
remains fully additive, which is a really valuable thing in this league. And
Yeah,
I think the
we're gonna see
Raptors
some
are
maturity from him next season come with the Raptors. But
For
yeah.
sure. Yeah. For sure. And I think all that is totally accurate. Yeah, AJ, man, we really appreciate you coming on. This was a really good conversation. I enjoyed it. I think we kind of all got to expand our perspectives about Paolo Banchero, and I love that it was just like a very kind of even tempered discussion, and you know that's why
Yeah.
we wanted to have you on, and you definitely brought a ton of expertise from the Magic perspective. So super appreciate it. Any last things you want to say?
Man, I keep doing what you guys are doing. I really think this is a high quality podcast. You guys are gonna take it all the way. The Knicks, you know, like it's heating up right now. Uh, he's coming back. Man, I forget his name. Yeah, y'all small
oh,
forward.
OG Anunoby.
OG, yeah. He's coming back, and you guys, man, I know Randall's out, but I don't know, man. I think this team, you guys have enough to compete in the playoffs. You know, I mean, what I saw from Josh Hart yesterday, you know, Brunson getting blitzed and just Josh Hart picking the Kings defense apart. You know, I mean, this team looks like it's ready. So, if the Magic play the Knicks, we definitely I gotta come back and kind of discuss, you know, what's the keys to the series for both teams, you know?
For sure.
So
Yeah.
that'd be
We'd love
nice.
we'd love to have you back. And I just want to say you'll know OG Anunoby's name really well if the Knicks play the Magic in the series and
Oh
he
yeah.
completely locks up your boy Paolo Banchero.
You know, it's funny because I respect him, but you know, when we played him when he was on the Raptors, he was a different player. Like
True.
he
Yeah.
wasn't he was so tired. I don't know if he was tired of being in the Raptors or he really wanted out. But like Paulo we didn't have problems. He wasn't
No,
really a
you're
striker,
right.
but
Julius Randle bullied OG Anunoby when he was on the Raptors, like completely
yeah,
bullied him and dismantled him. And then when
yeah.
he was on since he's been on the Knicks, no one's been able to do that. Not even Domantas Sabonis, who bullies everybody in the post. So I agree. I think that's totally spot on in terms of he was different. He's been different. Let's just I don't know. I don't know if
I
to
don't know,
attribute it to his
man.
effort or he didn't care or whatever, but he's been different. I'll say that.
Bro,
It,
I'm excited. Don't you know people got so again, Randall's a great player, but the way this team's coached, you know, Tibbs is doing a tremendous job. Like, I don't know, man. You guys still have enough to take it at least to the conference finals.
we agree with you very much, and we're actually going to discuss that with our next guest because a lot of Knicks fans seem to be kind of doomsdaying after the loss of Julius Randle, but we're not exactly two of them. AJ, one thing in the offseason, the OG Anunoby topic was pretty popular, and me and XJ were two of the very few who were adamant that the Knicks should trade RJ for OG at the time.
Yeah,
And
that's
when the Knicks
amazing.
played the Raptors early on in the season, OG had one of those games you were talking about, one of those games where he didn't look so good. And me and XJ took a decent amount of flack, like, "Oh, this is your champion, huh? This is the guy you want to trade for." So, yeah, that's a good eye by you because I think a lot of us saw OG kind of quiet quitting in Toronto, to be a little blunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
no, but
all right,
he's
AJ.
great.
All
All
right,
right,
man.
guys.
Good stuff. Like we'll have you back on, to chat and talk about stuff. Hopefully the Knicks. Yeah, like I said, I want to see the Knicks play Orlando in the playoffs for selfish reasons. I want to be able to drive down to Orlando for some games. So, yeah. Anything you want to shout out or plug on your way out? I know you run the Paolo Legacy account. Anything that you want to talk about or shout out before you dip?
Yeah, man, just follow the account. I started as a hobby, because me being from Orlando, like again, one thing I didn't touch on, Paulo just shifted the culture out here, so he's been the light, he brought Orlando basketball back, obviously with Franz and all these guys, but yeah, we're super excited. Hopefully, you play the Knicks. It'll be. I don't expect our guys to take that series, but it won't be. All games will be tough. Believe that. We're gonna bring the physicality. It's gonna be fun. But yeah,
That's so cool. That's so
Dope.
cool what you said about the city culture. I grew up in St. Pete, and I went to a couple of Magic games. I went to LeBron's first game on the Heat in Orlando. He scored like 51 or something at Amway, and that was also Dwight Howard's second to last year in Orlando,
yeah,
and no, maybe his last. No, it was the second to last year in Orlando. But the next year was the year when he like kind of quit or whatever. He got hurt and then didn't play the playoffs. And I remember Orlando was a really good basketball town even then. So I'm sure there was after Dwight Howard left. I know the 2010s were, kind
yeah.
of
Those vibes are coming back.
mediocre.
Those
Yeah,
vibes
so
are
it's cool
coming
that
back. So
the vibes are coming back. And I believe like you said a lot of super rational things about Paolo. Like we really appreciated your analysis. But I think one of the things you see when Magic fans discuss Paolo is there's clearly a different and special type of passion and connection they feel to him. And so it kind of makes me, I don't want to speak for XJ, but it kind of makes me feel like a jerk when I'm like trying to pull the rug out from, like, oh no,
yeah,
actually, he's actually a little bit worse than you think he is. If I was a Magic fan, I would just be like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like he like, just let us enjoy
man,
this.
bro. He's the guy. He's the guy in the city right now. That's what it is. But yeah, man.
All right, bro.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun. I hope to come back, man.
Appreciate it,
Awesome.
man.
Have a good
Thanks a
night.
lot. Have a good night, man. All right. Good conversation. That was awesome with AJ.
Yeah, that
Super
was really good.
knowledgeable Magic fan. Had a ton of insights. Clearly watches his Magic. So really good conversation there. We are going to turn to a conversation about the Knicks now. We're going to talk about Julius Randle. Julius Randle, as everyone knows, is out for the season. We have OG Anunoby. It's been shared with us here. Geoff, I don't know if you saw the news. Jordan Bubb in the chat had shared with us that OG Anunoby is playing tonight based on some reporting. I'm not sure who came out with it necessarily, but it looks like OG Anunoby is going to be playing tonight. So is Mitchell Robinson. So the Knicks are getting healthy besides the loss of Julius Randle. Julius Randle clearly is not coming back this season. And I think that Knicks fans differ in terms of what this might mean in terms of the Knicks overall ceiling, how it affects them. I think Knicks fans are unanimously believe that it will affect them potentially, in a negative way, but to what extent? And that's kind of the question that we want to talk about right now with our next guest. I'm bringing you up on the stage. How do you go? Oh, I think I brought the wrong one. Is this one? Is this the right one? Can you hear us, Lou?
I don't think he can hear us.
Might have some technical difficulties right now. I'll bring you back up in a sec, Lou. We'll work on that. But yeah, do you want to intro the conversation? I'm gonna tweet something now and work on the technical stuff with Lou.
Yeah. So, we kind of delved into this a little bit in the open, but I feel like the consensus around Knicks fans is Julius Randle's out. The team is unquestionably worse. I don't think you're going to find a Knicks fan who thinks that Julius Randle is a negative player or that his presence on the Knicks is a negative. So once we all sort of get in line behind the idea that, okay, the Knicks aren't going to hit their ceiling now that Julius Randle's on the team, this isn't going to be the best version of the team, you kind of have to ask the question, how much worse is this new version or this new iteration of the team going to be? And I think a lot of people think it's just as simple as, well, they're losing Julius Randle, so all of the impact that he provides, all the unique features to his game, they're just lost and they're irreplaceable. And XJ and I's perspective, at least, is that, all right, not so fast. Actually, they're going to be able to replace at least some of what Julius Randle does through the aggregate, through increasing Jalen Brunson's usage. And not only that, but there are things that Julius Randle doesn't do that when he's in the lineup, you're lacking because other players who do those things aren't as capable of doing them anymore. And what I mean by that is specifically Josh Hart and OG Anunoby on the wings together, defending and doing the role player things off of Jalen Brunson that maybe Julius Randle doesn't do as well. So, as OKC's coach said, a month or so ago, everything is about a trade-off. There's very few things that are purely additive or subtracting from your team. You input a player for another player, you're gaining stuff and you're losing stuff. And we're here to discuss just how much the Knicks are losing Julius Randle, and if there's anything they're gaining back that could mitigate this loss overall.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Is there anything that can mitigate the loss? And I think that, I think you made this point, and it's really important for us to say this because I think this constantly gets lost, especially on social media when you're down to kind of, like we said, the 280 characters thing. I and we both acknowledge that Julius Randle is a star level offensive impact player. Like, there's no way around it. He has made All NBA multiple times and, should have at least been in the conversation, if not made it in all of those situations, an all-star multiple times, definitely deserved. If we're just looking at impact metrics that Geoff and I value a lot for kind of the precision that they bring relative to the eye test, Julius Randle is a 90th and 95th percentile offensive EPM player the last 2 years, and a 91st and 97th percentile offensive LeBron player the last 2 years. That's an incredibly impactful and talented offensive player. There's no way around it. So I just, I want to reiterate the point that there's no way, we would be in any way downplaying how good Julius is. Let's try one more time to bring up Lou. Lou, can you hear us? Can you hear us now? Lou's headphones are not connecting, I think. All right. Well, we'll continue to have the conversation, and whenever Lou is able to get on, we'll bring him on. But the other thing I want to say is, and I'm not making this, this is really important to do on a podcast or where you can have audio and audio dynamic where I can explain what I'm trying to say here. Trae Young is another player who was 96th percentile and 95th percentile in offensive EPM the last 2 years, and 97th percentile and 98th percentile in offensive LeBron the last 2 years. So I think, I would also say, I know Knicks fans think, Julius is undoubtedly an amazing, impactful all NBA level player, and especially from an offensive standpoint. I would say the same about Trae Young. I would counter and say Trae Young is absolutely extremely impactful, whether you like him or not, whether you think, his defense is bad. If we're just talking about from an offensive perspective, his impact is elite and has been the last couple of years. And over the past 5 years, he's been one of the most impactful players in the entire league. So that is what I'm saying. You can be a very impactful offensive player regardless and still potentially have some negative effects on an offense and on a team overall. And that doesn't mean that, you have a negative effect such that the team is better off without you, but you may have a negative effect such that the team is not losing as much when they lose you as it might seem, given your just in a vacuum offensive impact. And so that's kind of the thrust of the argument here with regard to like why losing Julius Randle may not completely shatter what this Knicks team ceiling may be. I know we've heard a lot of people talk about the Knicks should just pack it up, just shut OG down, just forget about it. Let's all go home. I just don't. I think the Knicks can still make an Eastern Conference final without Julius Randle. And if they had a chance to beat the Celtics before, I don't think they don't have a chance to beat the Celtics now, is what I'll say. What do you think about that, Geoff? You might not agree with that, so I'm curious your opinion.
I think the loss of Julius will really be felt against Boston. I'm going to continue to make that point. I just
Oh
think they
yeah, I
need.
forgot that's your
I just
perspective.
think they need more variety offensively in specifically that matchup. I think that you take Milwaukee, you take Cleveland, even Orlando with Jalen Suggs, Indiana, Miami. I think any of those matchups, Jalen Brunson, with all the shooting and all the defense that they can now provide around him with OG Anunoby back, I think they have enough to win those series. I don't think they're 100% to win those series, obviously, but I do think they can win any of those series. And I'm very much with you. I think, if they can get the 3 seed, get the 6 seed, I think the Eastern Conference Final, I don't mean get the 6 seed in a good way, but if they happen to get the 6 seed or they can jump up to the 3 seed, I think the Eastern Conference Finals are very much in the cards. I just think that at the very top, that's where Julius Randle's absence is going to be felt the most. Because I think Lou, you're on. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, no, we're good now. Sorry about that, guys.
You're all
No,
good.
you're all good. Technical issues happen. We're really happy to have you join us for our last part of the conversation. Appreciate it, Lou. You and I had a little back and forth on Twitter there. That got a little hostile. Uh, and
Just
I
Twitter
asked you to.
things.
It's a Twitter thing, and so that's why we're doing this here. We want to be able to take conversations off that platform where it feels like so contentious, and you're just stuck in these bite-sized clips of content. You can't really unpack your perspectives. That's why I asked you to join. Come on, you said, yeah, hell yeah, I'm down to jump on and have this conversation and live. And so we really appreciate that. Super happy to have you jump on. We were just like talking about our Julius Randle perspective a little bit. I don't know if you got to hear any of it. If not, we'll kind of recap and then get to hear kind of where
Sure.
you're coming from with things.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to reiterate what you're saying, like when I was talking to you, I was like, damn, like I could write a whole essay on this. I can't freaking put this in 200 characters. It's like
Yeah,
so annoying. And then you're like taking out words, trying to make space, and like, yeah,
yeah.
this is obviously a much better format.
For sure, for sure. Much better format to have the conversations. So what Geoff and I were just really saying is that we wanted to first put on the table Julius Randle is an incredible offensive player. There's no way around it. No one's arguing that or trying to challenge that. He's an incredible offensive impact player. We love impact metrics here because they offer a lot of precision and kind of take the eye test out of it and give us another way to evaluate players. And they agree comprehensively. Julius is an amazing impact player. And when I had made the comparison to you on Twitter to Trae Young, it was not to say that Trae Young and Julius Randle are the same player, or the same kind of player, but Trae Young is another player who has the same kind of metrics in terms of his offensive impact. In fact, has even higher offensive impact than Julius Randle, using those same metrics. And I think, to me, objectively, Trae Young's an amazing offensive impact player as well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't have some kind of diminishing returns to their presence on the court, which I think that Julius Randle may have. Not such that the Knicks would be better without Julius Randle. I don't think the Knicks would be better without Julius Randle, but just that their ceiling may not go down by as much as people think, given that some of the things that don't work as well when Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle are on the court together. That's kind of the broader perspective. I don't know if Geoff, you want to add anything before Lou jumps in.
No, I think you nailed it. I'm locked up with you, so I'm just excited to hear what Lou has to say.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously we could start a lot of places with this, but I think I'll start out by agreeing with a lot of what you're saying, in that, obviously I think we've found out the more we can give Brunson usage, the better it is for the team. But sort of my counterpoint to that would be that I think that it was trending that way anyway. I don't think that, I mean, obviously to some degree he's had to soak up more usage, but I mean, it was only a 14 game sample size. But if I'm really going to drill into like what this team looked like, and then we're going to talk about ceiling, like then we sort of have to ask a different question, is when the Knicks were at their peak, like let's say after that Denver game, which I would call the peak of the season, where they beat the Nuggets by 36 points, just ran them off the court. Like after that game, I would say like man, I think this team has about a 10% chance to win a championship. Now, that could obviously be wrong. Like, that's just me coming up with a figure, but I compare that to now, and, not to burst anyone's bubble, but, it's zero now to me, or, close to zero. And that's why the point where I sort of get lost in this is like, if we're talking about ceiling, then, in those 14 games, we saw a team that, I mean, if you guys had to guess, what do you think their point differential was?
I don't have to guess. So
I figured that. Yeah. So, I
but I'll let
mean,
XJ go if he wants
yeah.
to.
Oh, I during those 14 games, just in terms of the team or in terms of
Yeah, they were
specific
12 and
lineups.
2, 12 and 2,
When they were
just
12 and 2, I think it was
yeah,
like, what was it,
overall.
like plus 13, something like that?
Yeah, so
I
they
think-
were plus 15.
15.
Yeah,
And
That's
in those
15.1.
Right. So, I mean, obviously it's a 14 game sample size. We're not dragging that over 82 games, but even if we were to go, 2 standard deviations away from that, like that's still a legitimate title contender. And I think in that time we saw what a better and like reformed version of Julius was. I think he was playing extremely well defensively. It was definitely his best defensive stretch of the year. And I don't think there were a lot of bad possessions from him. I think he sort of acquiesced to the idea that he was a clear two. And obviously, this is all just my perspective, what was going on. But I really loved the way that he was playing. And I thought it was very additive to what they were doing. And, you know, Brunson's just, I mean, he's just been incredible. He's just, every time you want to doubt him, he proves you're wrong again. But the idea of going an entire playoff stretch with only one legitimate offensive engine, like that's tough. That's really tough. And I think we saw it, we saw it last year in the Heat series. Like every lineup without him, like you couldn't even play him. He couldn't even sit for 5 minutes or the team would lose. And that's kind of why they lost that series. And if I was to point to what I think is going to go wrong this year, it would be probably something like that. Brunson going +7, +8, and then we lose the 5 minutes he's off the court by 12 points. And that's sort of the point where I think Julius could have really helped this team. It's not, to be the primary ball handler for 20 minutes, 30 minutes a game. It's like, can you just run the show for 10 minutes? And, you know, obviously he's not an elite offensive generator. He's not that, but he's a worlds better than, an OG Anunoby. I mean, I hate like talking bad about these players 'cause I love these
No, it's
dudes,
totally
but
valid.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like Dante DiVincenzo is not like an offensive engine. Deuce McBride is not an offensive engine. These aren't guys who can really ever draw double teams. And for all the bad that we've seen Julius do, and I think it's funny that I'm sitting here defending him after how much time I've spent cursing at my TV about him. But I mean, he's a guy that when he's going right, he can draw double teams, and he can like honestly, I think the biggest step in his game this year was his passing. I thought, he averaged about 5.5 assists in that 14 game stretch, which isn't incredible, but I think he really sort of gave the Knicks another place to go during the times and nights where like, Brunson, like the load he's shouldering right now is pretty freaking heavy. And we kind of saw it the other night in the Heat game. And it's like, well, he's not going to score 30 points and we have no shot. Like, and that's kind of what looking forward, I'm like, he's going to have some duds in the playoffs, like as incredibly as he is. And right now it sort of feels like there's no one else on the team that can put up a 15 for 25 game and save us in those situations.
So I think that you raised a number of good points. And honestly, I think I'm a little bit closer maybe not closer to you, but I think I'm a pretty solid middle ground here because I definitely think that the ceiling points you made, like the Knicks ceiling is lower enough to the point where I don't see them contending with Boston. Whereas I think that with Julius, they really would have had a chance to at least push Boston to make a series competitive. I'm just gonna add on one question to XJ and then turn it over to XJ because I think he'll do the best job of not rebutting your points, but just engaging your points and maybe presenting the other side. And my question to add on to Lou's would be, if what we're seeing right now is 100% of Jalen Brunson, or maybe even 105%, like this is easily the best stretch of basketball he's played in his entire life. And we agree that reinserting Julius Randle into the equation might take Jalen Brunson from 100 or 105% down to 90%. Is it possible that still 90% of Brunson and 90% of Randle is still meaningfully better than 100% of Brunson and 100% of whoever's replacing him? And how do you kind of draw those lines?
Yeah, in answer to that question first, and yeah, Lou, you made a bunch of great points. I wrote a couple down just to make sure I kept track of what you were saying. So appreciate you extrapolating on your view. So to that question, real quick, Geoff. Yeah, it's so hard to do it that way, just because it's like, okay, well, if Brunson is 90% of himself and we get 90% of Randle, is that enough? Like, probably. If we get 80% of Brunson and 80% of Randle, is that enough? Like, probably not. Like, it's so I think it depends on where the numbers actually come down. But in terms of that, like, philosophy, I agree. So the thing that all three of us agree on is that the Knicks ceiling is lower without having Randle. What we don't agree on is that the Knicks ceiling is dramatically or significantly lower without Randle. That's where we disagree. So what I'll say is, to a couple of your points, Lou. So you said, mentioning that the Knicks have one legitimate offensive engine right now in Jalen Brunson, and, they have to have another place to go when Brunson is out of the game, or doesn't have it in some circumstances. I totally agree. I think that is why having Randle, despite him potentially having shortcomings in a couple of places that I'm going to talk about, that's why he's still a net positive to the team despite some of that. So I think he is a net positive, and I think for those are the two reasons I would write down and say is why he's a net positive. At the same time, we talked about some of the lineups or some of the data from the times when they were just steamrolling the league, and when they first got OG Anunoby, the 14-2 stretch that you mentioned. If we just dive a little bit deeper into those lineups, I think that some of the issues to me is that we allocate a lot of responsibility for the success of the team to everybody who happens to be there. And I think what we know from just like watching the NBA is that the success of the team is not necessarily dependent on everybody who happens to be there. A lot of guys are more or less like interchangeable or less impactful than we think they are. And it's really hard to extrapolate that. But just like one way we can try to start to do that is first just look at like raw lineup data. So looking at some of the lineup data from that time stretch, with Brunson, OG, and Julius Randle on, the Knicks were plus 26.1 in 580 possessions per cleaning the glass, so that filters out garbage time, which is obviously ridiculous. And they were just completely steamrolling teams. But then we look at Brunson and OG on with Randle off, the Knicks were actually better, plus 32.4 in 330 possessions. So, of course, these are small samples, and you can't extrapolate and say, well, the Knicks are clearly better. Of course, these are small samples. But my point here is that we might just look at the overall result and say, hey, look, the Knicks with these guys are running over teams. But then we pull out one of them, and it's like, wait, they're still doing it. So is it that person who's responsible for it, or who's actually responsible here? And then if we want to look at really larger samples, the Knicks with Brunson on and Randle off, they're plus 10 in over 2,000 possessions. Their offense scores 121.6 points per 100. The Knicks with Brunson and Randle on together are plus 7.3 in 2,700 possessions, a slightly better offense, but a much worse defense. So again, these are situations where we're looking at the success of the team. They're successful in both situations, but more successful in the conditions where Randle is not playing. And this is a much larger sample size. We're talking about that, like multiple thousands of possessions here, which you can start to feel a little bit more confident that there's something like actually happening that is responsible for it. And to me, it comes down to the synergy between the two players. So if we compare this data with another star pairing that I would think is more synergistic, let's say Giannis and Dame are plus 10 together, but just Dame without Giannis is plus 1, and just Giannis without Dame is minus 1. So that to me demonstrates synergy. Each of them on the court, they're able to kind of hold their own and keep their team afloat. When you put both of them on together, they're dominant. They're destroying teams. We don't really see that kind of effect when Julius and Jalen are on the court together. We just don't see it. And that's actually been true for like multiple years now. And especially, given that we've had the time that we've had OG, we've seen that kind of come to fruition. And in my perspective is really that comes down to the fact that they don't put Brunson and Randall in a ton of actions together. So oftentimes Randall is just on the week, he's an off ball. He just kind of stands around at times, to be honest. And I don't think it's all his fault, but I think they don't put them in actions together. For example, Randall doesn't play the roll man. Like his frequency that he was the roll man this year on pick and rolls is 3.7% of the time, or 10th percentile in the NBA. And he shot 35% on shot attempts in that situation where he was playing a pick and roll and he was the roll man. The Knicks essentially only use their centers as rollers, which makes sense because they don't have a ton of space in the paint to have a 4 actually rolling when they have the 5 clogging up the paint. So it's just like the way that the Knicks kind of structure their offense, that it just brings a different element when Randall's on the court and you have someone who is spacing out and just shooting and who is adding all this off-ball value, as opposed to Randall, whose main value comes from when he has the ball and comes from the situations where Brunson doesn't have it or Brunson's off the court. Just like you said, Lou, I think that's primarily where his value comes from. And there's a ton of value there, but I don't know if it offsets that. And the last thing I'll say is his defense, which you mentioned he was playing much better defense. And I do think there's validity to that. Hard to say definitively because it's a short, a small sample, but overall on the season, the EPM, estimated plus minus, has him in the 60th percentile in defensive impact. And that's the most favorable metric towards him. BPM has him as a minus 0.3 on defense. For reference, guys like Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Brunson, and Austin Reeves are just about the same on defense. These are guys that I think everybody thinks of as like really bad defenders. Julius, basically per BPM, is having a similar impact as those guys on the defense. LeBron has him. LeBron, in terms of the B-ball index impact metric, LeBron has him in the 33rd percentile in defensive impact, 25th percentile in defensive versatility, and he has a low matchup difficulty, so he's not even taking on really difficult matchups for his position. We often talk about how bad Obi Toppin is. Geoff told me this. Nate Duncan just had said that Obi Toppin is the worst defensive power forward in the NBA.
I believe
Obi's
that.
defensive metrics are not far off from Julius Randle's. They're very similar. They're like in the same range on literally all of these data points that I just mentioned. So I don't know. To me, there's a ton that Randle offers, and I love the points that you brought up. I agree with them. I don't really have a dispute there. I think it's just we're kind of looking at on one end what he's bringing and not looking at on the other end what he's taking away, which I think on the net, he's bringing more than he's taking away, but I do think he's taking away a lot. And so that's where my perspective comes from.
Yeah, I guess it was really cool hearing those advanced metrics for Julius. And I guess my problem with him for the longest time has been I look at him and I'm like, there's no reason why you can't at least be an average defender. And I think a lot of it with him is mental. And, obviously last year in the playoffs, some of it had to do with the injury. But I mean, there's really no denying that their defense would take at least somewhat of a step back if you're going to sub in him for someone like Josh Hart. But where I do think, if we're talking about ceiling, in the East, to me, the two teams you're looking at are the Celtics and the Bucks. And those are two teams that I think Julius, first of all, for the Celtics series, something that I thought that he could definitely help them with is if Tibbs was ever going to consider playing 5 out, to me, I think he would be insane to not at least try it for 10 minutes a game against Porzingis, because obviously we know as great as Isaiah and Mitch are, at least, Randall's going to be better getting out to the 3-point line than them. And then, kind of a similar thing with the Bucks and Lopez, but just in general, I think his size is important. I mean, I think they're a little small right now, even with OG back. Like, you know, besides the center, the tallest guy on the floor is OG, who's what, like 6'7" or something like that. So I guess, yeah, I guess I would say I pretty much have. I don't have any advanced metrics telling you that Julius Randle is great at defense. Um, but what I do believe is that, I mean, I think he was a much better defender going one-on-one against guys. I mean,
I'd
obviously
agree with that. Yeah.
his big weakness on defense is he just blows, slides all the time, and you want to just, you know, throw something at the TV. But um, in a series against Milwaukee, him guarding Middleton, like I'm okay with that. In a series against Boston, I think he could actually do a pretty good job on someone like Jaylen Brown. Or, I mean, listen, they're going to get him in some action sometimes, but I think the other point I would come at this towards is like, let's talk about like the opportunity cost of Julius Randle versus having to play Bogdan Bogdanovic for 15 minutes, or God forbid, Alec Burks for 15 minutes. Like, I mean, as we saw last night, like those guys, they can run up some pretty big checks in just 7 or 8 minutes. So, like, God knows he's not the best defensive player, but I mean, even just having him for those minutes, like, I think that is worth a good amount above replacement.
Yeah, I agree with you about at the highest level. That's where Randall's presence is going to be missed the most. I love the point you made that, like, yeah, maybe the metrics say Randall's defense is bad in a vacuum, but against Milwaukee and Boston, he can be used on Tatum and Giannis, and they don't really have a replacement for that size. I think that's something that concerns me about it. And uh, I I'm not going to say I fully agree with you, because I still think there's probably a gap between what you think the Knicks are going to lose overall and what I think. But I definitely resonate with a lot of the points you're making and agree with a decent amount of the points you're making. I think you've made a number of really good points in defending Randall and how maybe the numbers in a vacuum aren't fully capturing the absence they're going to feel in this postseason when they replace him for nothing. Maybe there's a conversation to be had about, okay, if they were able to replace Randall with more additive pieces, when they have a contract coming up in the offseason or something, maybe that's a different conversation. But right now, specifically, when they're losing him basically for nothing, it's just the same team minus Randall.
Yeah.
The things that Randall brings are they're really going to feel lost in some of these playoff matchups.
Yeah, and I guess like that's sort of the part that really went sideways. I actually felt really good about that trade when they made it with Detroit. I thought that at least Bogdanovich, like, all right, we're going to be able to run offense through him for 12, 15 minutes a game. And now you see it. And I mean, listen, he's been playing a lot better lately, but I think sort of what we've seen with him is he's another guy who you have to give him the ball with at least a slight advantage for him to be effective. You can't just give him the ball and be like, okay, show's yours. Like we've seen him try to do that, and it gets really, really ugly. I think we've seen some of the ugliest turnovers of the season from him. So, like, for me, like that's a huge point, is that even if it just meant like, and, here's another thing I'd want to bring up is like, do we think Josh Hart is a 40 minutes a game player in the playoffs for a team that's going to make the Eastern Conference Finals? And again, this is me bagging on one of my favorite players on the team, but I mean, to me, like, another benefit of having Randall is that these guys would all be playing pretty much the exact amount of minutes that you would think, like, okay, that's what he should be slotted into when we're talking about, Deuce has played so well lately, but we're talking about, Deuce, Dante, and Hart. I think those are the only three guys that, let's say this team is fully healthy, you're going to pencil in 38 minutes for Randall, Brunson, OG, and then you have the centers who are going to, obviously take up 48 by them too. But, I think that those minutes left over are pretty much the perfect amount for those three guys. And I think now without him, I think now you're either playing Josh Hart 45 minutes or, you have to play Bogdanovich or you have to play Alec Burks or, you have to put guys in, Deuce McBride, like, good Lord, like, it's tough to ask this guy to play 45 minutes a night. And, I'm fully on board with Tibbs. I can't stand it when, you know, fans lose their mind over the minutes because I'm like, well, would you rather Josh Hart play 45 minutes or would you rather lose? Like, it's one or the other, So, and I think that's a really hard position. That's a position that Tibbs wouldn't have to be in the playoffs when rotation, obviously shrink. Like, I think that would be a really solid 8-man rotation that would give them the best chance. Even if Randall, yes, he's going to take away some things on the defensive end, but I mean, if we're talking about the other 6 guys in that rotation, we're talking about Mitch, Isaiah, Deuce, OG, like there's enough really good defenders to sort of cover up for that, in my mind, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. We actually talked a little bit about this before you got on, but to me, and I think to both of us, the minutes thing is going to come down to how willing Tibbs is to stick with those 3 guard lineups we've seen the last couple weeks of Brunson, Deuce, and DiVincenzo and play them without Josh Hart. Because I agree with you, especially when Josh Hart refuses to shoot threes and he's being left open.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a 40-minute-a-night guy in a playoff series when coaches are going to scheme against him.
And it's going to be worse. Like, we know that, you think they're leaving him now, wait until the playoffs. Like, they're going to, like, that's sort of, sorry to jump in. I just want to really hammer this down. It's just that, I think when you talk about playoff basketball and playoff defenses, like, they're going to find your weaknesses and pretty much make you scream from them. And, right now, I don't think teams are really doing, I still see teams like closing out to Josh Hart and stuff. And I'm like,
it's pretty crazy.
He told you he has a broken wrist. Like, what are you
we'll
doing?
see. We'll see how they guard him tonight. Is going to be
Yeah.
the question. I do think with regard to that, I do think Josh Hart in those situations is probably more effective potentially when Julius Randle's not on the court, or at least with the idea that they wouldn't have 3 guys who are at least like hesitant to shoot to some extent. With Julius shooting, I think he's shooting like 31% from 3 this year. So having Julius, Josh Hart, a non-shooter, and then a center, a non-shooter, all on the court at the same time, probably be better for Josh Hart to kind of be the only non-shooter if, there's a center along with him or, in other situations. But I think these are all really great points. Definitely appreciate everything that you brought up. And I think that, you argued for your perspective, completely in a way that was totally coherent and made a ton of sense. And I think really drove home kind of where you were coming from. So definitely appreciate it. I know we wanted to wrap by 7:30. So any kind of last things that you want to say? And we really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation and it being very cordial and not the way that you might see some conversations on social media, which is definitely, that's how things go when you're actually like talking to another human being and just kind of hashing out your different perspectives. So thanks again for coming on. Any last words you want to say?
No, man, it was awesome to talk this out with you guys. Honestly, I don't get too many opportunities to have elongated sort of more nuanced conversations about the Knicks, who I mean obviously love, but I mean I think it's okay to have strong feelings, and then I think you know, when you talk to someone on the other side, you sort of, you know, you can see where they're coming from a little bit better.
Totally agree with that. 100%. All right, Lou, thanks a lot. We'll be in touch. I'm going to drop you a follow on Twitter and we'll just stay in touch. All right, man.
All right. Thanks, brothers.
All right.
Have a good day.
Later. You too. All right. That'll really do it for our first edition of Hot Fan Theory. This was a lot of fun. We had some really good conversations. It went really smoothly, I think. Geoff, do you have any closing thoughts that you wanna end things out with?
No, just this was totally experimental on our behalf, and I mean that went way better than I could have possibly imagined. Just all the comments we got, we appreciate. Like, we're gonna evolve, as we keep doing this. So if you had a comment that we didn't get to, we're gonna try to be more interactive. We're gonna learn from maybe things we didn't do as well this time to try and include as many people as possible. And the last thing I want to say is, we could have more guests, and we're going to have more guests, but I mean a greater number of guests on the next show. So if you're interested in coming on the stage and, speaking your piece about anything, please just leave a comment on, our next podcast episode on YouTube, our next short, just anything. We check them all. We respond to them all. Engage with us, make us think, and we'd love to, have you on here and talk more about whatever it is you have to say, because everybody's opinions are worthy and valid, and we're just trying to create a platform for everyone.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. Co-sign all of that. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Appreciate everybody being there and interacting and engaging. Shout out Jordan Bubb for all the insights and intel that he's been sharing. Tim and Teo, what's going on? Dirty Dancer. Who else has been interacting in there? Nick's tape, obviously, earlier on. We got a little sighting from Andrew Claudio. What's going on, GMAC? I'll see you on the Knicks Film School watch along in a half hour. John Leary and anybody else who was out there like commenting, we really appreciate all the engagement, and hopefully, next time this went really smoothly, and next time we'll get more people on, get more engagement in the chat, and hopefully this will be a extremely interactive platform, and that's kind of what we want Hot Fan Theory to be. So went really great, and thanks a lot. This has been Hot Fan Theory.